I started my own business at 15 to escape my toxic home. Years later, my family sued me for $185,000. Hi, I'm Jude, 31, and at 15 I started a business in my parents' basement that paid off our bills, bought a house in cash, and made me the target of a lawsuit from my own family. Why? Because I stole the life my brother deserved. That's what my mom said, right before she tried to sabotage everything I'd built. Growing up in Ashtabula, Ohio was like living inside a rusted lunchbox. Everything felt old, gray, and forgotten. My dad worked at a paper mill that always smelled like wet cardboard, and my mom stocked shelves at a drugstore where expired coupons were more common than customers. We weren't poor in the poetic, nostalgic sense. We were poor in the don't open that fridge and hope the lights stay on sense. Then there was my older brother, Mason. 2 years up the chain. Star quarterback. Local heartthrob. My parents living proof that they'd done something right. And me? I was the kid who got grounded for rewiring the toaster into a phone charger. You know, my dad would say, if you had Mason's charm and just half his work ethic, then I'd be a golden retriever. I'd mutter. They didn't laugh. They never did. But I wasn't trying to impress them. I was trying to survive. At 14, I started tinkering with broken computers people left on the curb. Pulled apart CRT monitors like they were treasure chests. I got my hands on an old point-of-sale system a neighbor was tossing, fixed it, and sold it for $60. That lit the fuse. I spent the next few months buried in soldering fumes, JavaScript forums, and Craigslist ads. Built basic inventory tracking setups for auto shops and hardware stores in town. Cheap stuff. Ugly interfaces. But it worked. By 15, I was pulling in more money than my mom. And that's when everything cracked. The moment I showed my parents a $900 check, my dad went from, "Get your junk out of the basement," to, "You need to start paying rent." Rent. At 15. For a room with a busted window and a mattress that still had Mason's initials sharpened on the side. But fine. I paid. I gave them what they asked. And I started hiding what they didn't. I kept 2 ledgers. One they saw, one they didn't. One showed pocket money. The other showed a growing business. I stashed the real profits behind the water heater in a lockbox I bolted to the wall. But Mason? Mason got everything. New laptop, gas money, college prep support. That somehow always came out of my pocket. And when I found out they'd opened credit cards in my name, 3 of them, maxed out at $28,000 to fix the roof and get Mason a reliable car for school, that was the night I stopped being their son and started being their target. When I confronted them, my dad didn't even flinch. "You've lived here for free. This is your contribution to the family." I was 17. And I wasn't going to survive another year like that. So I lawyered up. With help from my cousin Ray and a pro bono attorney named Sharon, I filed for emancipation. And that's when the war started. Getting emancipated at 17 isn't like flicking off a light switch, it's like defusing a bomb while the people who built it scream that you're ungrateful. The day the papers were served, my dad called it a betrayal. My mom cried like I'd died. Mason? He stood there in the kitchen, arms crossed, smirking like I was auditioning for the world's most pointless rebellion. "You think you're grown?" he sneered. "You're just a broke nerd with a Wi-Fi bill." But I wasn't broke. Not even close. What I was done. I moved out the day after the court approved temporary separation while the case proceeded. Ray's friend had a converted storage unit he was willing to rent me for cheap. No insulation. No heating. But I had an air mattress, a space heater, and no one standing over my shoulder demanding rent for oxygen. That tiny space became my headquarters. I rebranded my service, RevCore Systems. Sounded fancy. I even made a logo using free software and way too many gradients. Still ugly, but people remembered it. By the time emancipation was granted, months of hearings, documents, statements, hell, I had 3 steady clients and 5 more lined up. And the debt? The $28,000 they dropped on my head? That stayed mine. Because the banks didn't care about emancipation. They cared about payments. So I made them. Every single one. While my old classmates played Fortnite or worried about prom, I was rebuilding a database at 2 a.m. for a supply warehouse that ran entirely on paper records from the 80s. I learned the difference between good code and functional code. One looks nice. The other pays rent. I lived lean. rice, beans, frozen vegetables. My idea of a luxury meal was 2 eggs instead of 1. And yet, I felt free in a way I never had before. Even with the debt, even with no family to fall back on, even with my parents bad-mouthing me to anyone who'd listen, I had control. At 18, I bought a beat-up Ford Ranger for $1,200 cash and finally stopped borrowing Ray's van. At 19, I upgraded to an actual office, technically a trailer, but it had a door, Wi-Fi, and no rats. Then came the warehouse contract. A regional auto parts distributor with 12 locations and an inventory system held together with duct tape and prayer. Their corporate guy flew out to meet me expecting a team of professionals. He found a 19-year-old in a hoodie, shaking his hand with fingers still sore from soldering wires. But after 2 hours of explaining my process, showing mock-ups, and detailing implementation timelines, he leaned back and said the words that still echo. "You're better than the firms we paid 10 times more." We signed that afternoon. It wasn't luck. It was sweat, caffeine, and stubbornness. By 20, I had hired 2 part-time techs and a project manager. By 21, I paid off the last of the fraudulent debt. I didn't tell my parents. I figured they'd find out the same way everyone else did. When I bought a house. In cash. The house was ugly as hell. Split level, brown siding, patchy yard like a bad haircut. But it was mine. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a detached garage I turned into a workshop. I paid $112,000 cash, no mortgage, no cosigner, no questions. The realtor asked if I was part of a trust fund. I told her, "Yeah. I trust myself." The deed came in the mail a week later. I held it in my hands like a trophy. I wish I could say I celebrated. Took a trip. Bought something stupid. I didn't. I fixed a leaky pipe, changed the locks, and installed cameras, because part of me already knew this win was going to draw blood. And I was right. The letter arrived 3 weeks after closing. Thin envelope, no return address. I opened it in the kitchen while eating reheated ramen. 2 pages. Handwritten. Mom's handwriting. She congratulated me on the house. Said she always knew I'd make something of myself. That she and Dad were so proud of me. That Mason was struggling. That the old house needed a new furnace. That family supports each other. That now it was my turn. Then came the number, $50,000. She called it a gesture of gratitude. For everything they sacrificed. I didn't reply. A week later, Mason showed up. I came home from a client site install to find him sitting on my porch, drinking my soda like he owned the place. Hoodie half-zipped, phone in hand, scuffed sneakers up on my welcome mat. "You made it," he said like we were old friends. Big man now. I didn't answer. Just unlocked the door and walked inside. He followed. "This place is decent," he said. "Could use some color. Kinda feels like a bunker." I turned around. "Why are you here?" He shrugged. "Mom's worried. You haven't responded. Thought maybe we should talk." "We don't talk. We throw punches and then pretend nothing happened." He didn't flinch. "Look. Things at home aren't great. Dad's hours got cut. Mom's part-time job isn't covering it. And I got laid off. Again." I said nothing. So I was thinking. He continued, "You owe them. You know you do. Everything you learned in that house. That house. The one where my tools were called junk. Where my ideas were nerd crap. Where my future was just a phase." I walked over to the counter, grabbed an envelope, and held it out. He raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "Something I've been saving." "The receipts." He pulled them out. "Read the printouts. Photocopies of the credit card statements. The debt. The emancipation case. The judge's ruling." He stared at the last page, the court statement that my parents' behavior constituted financial exploitation. And then he laughed. A bitter, dry sound. "Still holding a grudge?" "No," I said. "I'm holding the line." He shoved the papers back into the envelope and looked around the house again. "You know what Dad says?" he asked. "He says you stole the life I deserved." I stared at him. "You mean the life I built after they stole mine?" He didn't answer. Just stepped toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back one last time. "They're gonna come for more, Jude. You know that, right?" I nodded. "They already did. The lawsuit arrived on a Thursday, Because of course it did. Thursdays were always the day I underestimated. It came by courier. Man in a blazer, clipboard in hand. "Are you Jude Whitman?" he asked. "Depends," I said. "Who's asking? Debt collector? Ex-girlfriend? Secret twin?" He didn't laugh. "You've been served." I opened the packet on my kitchen counter while reheating leftover chili. My spoon paused midair as I read the first line. Plaintiffs, Leonard Whitman, Teresa Whitman, and Mason Whitman. Defendant, Jude Whitman. Cause, compensation for misappropriation of family resources and emotional damages. They were suing me. My parents and brother were suing me. For $185,000. Plus a 40% stake in my company. Plus interest. Plus compensatory damages for lost opportunities Mason claimed were his birthright. I dropped the spoon. The chili splashed onto the floor, but I didn't move. I kept reading. In their complaint, they claimed they had funded my early development, housing, utilities, food, parental oversight, and that my success was entirely due to the foundational support of the family home. Mason added that I had capitalized unfairly on skills nurtured in a shared environment, and that he had directly inspired the business model. I actually laughed out loud at that part. Inspired it? He once called my POS demo a glorified cash register for broke people. I called Sharon, my emancipation lawyer, immediately. She remembered me. I read her the complaint. There was a long pause. Then she said, "Oh, hell no. We got to work." Sharon pulled in a civil litigator, Mel, sharp as razors and 10 times scarier. They reviewed everything: business filings, financials, the emancipation case, the debt records. "This is a shakedown," Mel said. "They know they can't win. But they're hoping you'll pay them to go away." "What if I don't?" I asked. "Then we bury them." I was in. The legal process kicked off. Discovery was brutal. Every email, every text, every shared family group chat became potential evidence. They claimed I'd used the basement rent-free, so I sent over documentation showing I'd paid $400 a month starting at 16, in cash, and that I'd paid for groceries more than my parents had. They said they emotionally supported my career. I submitted transcripts from the court case where they admitted to opening fraudulent credit cards in my name. Sharon added in a statement, "Support does not typically involve identity theft." Mason's affidavit was especially absurd. He claimed he gave me key business advice growing up. My favorite quote? "I told Jude once that if he didn't stop fixing trash, he'd end up broke forever." That must have motivated him. We submitted it without editing. Let the words speak for themselves. Meanwhile, the family group chat lit up like a bonfire. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions. "Can't you just work this out privately? Your poor mother is in tears. This is tearing the family apart." "What family? The one that watched them steal my future and said nothing?" "No thanks." Then came the kicker. They tried to freeze my business account. Claimed I was attempting to hide funds during litigation. Their lawyer filed a request for a temporary injunction to block access. Mel countered with our own filing, including a copy of my emancipation ruling and a strongly worded motion that basically said, "Try it. We dare you." The judge denied their request. Swiftly. And with a footnote that said essentially, "Nice try." I should have felt victorious. Vindicated. Instead, I felt like I needed a shower and a nap. Because you know what it feels like when your entire childhood rewrites itself in depositions and court filings? Like your memories got audited. And the receipts show something you don't want to see. The deposition was held in a rented conference room that smelled like carpet glue and disappointment. My parents arrived with matching manila folders and lawyer smirks. Mason walked in last, wearing sunglasses indoors like he was being sued for TMZ royalties, not malicious lies. Sharon leaned over and whispered, "Just breathe. Their own mouths will do half our work." And they did. First question. "Can you describe the financial contributions you made to Jude's business?" "Dad. We let him use our electricity." "Mom. We fed him." "Mel. He paid rent. Starting at 16. You signed a receipt." Mom blinked. "That was for discipline. Not real rent." "Oh. Cool. I guess we're redefining rent now." Then Mason took the stand. And my God, if the universe ever needed proof that arrogance is hereditary, it was this guy under oath. I was the reason Jude even got into business. He claimed, completely deadpan. Explain, Mel said. Well, I always talked about hustling, you know. And he saw that. Do you have any documented involvement in the company? Not, like, documented. But we shared a room growing up. That was his legal claim. Shared heir. Must own the business. At one point, Mel asked if he could code or had ever built a POS system. Mason said, POS? Like, piece of SH? And laughed like it was clever. Mel smiled politely. Wrote something down. Probably, thank you for being dumb. By the end of depositions, their lawyer looked like she wanted to defect mid-case. She was rubbing her temple with both hands, like praying for a brain reset. Outside, in the parking lot, Mason tried to confront me. Again. You're being a dick, he said. This is family. No, I said. This is fraud. You want a share in something you never touched. You want a cut of the work you mocked. And you're too arrogant to see how pathetic that is. He stepped forward like that was supposed to scare me. But I've faced down overdue bills, eviction notices, $28,000 of stolen credit card debt, and my parents telling me, it's not that big of a deal. I've faced down every version of being told I didn't matter. Mason? He was just a rerun. I leaned in and said, you're not gonna beat me. Because I already lived through the worst you people had to offer. And I walked away. 3 weeks later, their lawyer proposed a settlement. $25,000 to drop the case, no admission of guilt. I didn't even let Mel counter. We rejected it in under 20 minutes. Because this wasn't about money anymore. This was about the principle. They built a cage for me out of guilt, manipulation, and expectation. And I was going to make damn sure I welded that thing shut behind me forever. The court date was set for mid-October. By that point, I'd already spent $14,000 on legal fees, and I would have spent 4 times that if it meant never letting them rewrite my story. The night before, I didn't sleep. Not from nerves. From focus. I was in my garage office, reviewing everything, every statement, every invoice, every shred of proof that they hadn't just failed me, they tried to bankrupt me and call it love. I printed a photo at 3 a.m. It was of the first POS system I ever fixed. That old machine I pulled from someone's curb at 14. I taped it inside my briefcase like armor. Court was packed. Family on both sides showed up. Cousins, uncles, the whole peanut gallery of people who'd stayed silent when I was 17 and broke and scared and alone. Now they were here like it was a reality show taping. My parents sat at their table, dressed like church. Mom had that martyr expression she'd perfected over decades. Eyes wet, mouth pinched, spine straight like she just finished baking a son out of sheer willpower. Dad stared at me like I was a stranger who stole his name. Mason chewed gum like he was auditioning to be the dumbest man in a courtroom drama. Sharon opened with a timeline. Business growth. Financial statements. Emancipation records. Every piece of paper was a nail in the coffin of their case. Mel brought out the deposition quotes. Mason's. POS means piece of SH. Jem got an actual snort from one of the reporters in the back. Then their side had their turn. Their lawyer argued that Jude Whitman, me, was an ungrateful beneficiary of a nurturing household. She cited things like emotional mentorship and the priceless value of family unity. Mel calmly asked if that unity included identity theft. She then introduced Exhibit F, my dad's text from last year that said, "You got your damn business from us. You owe us." Mel asked, "Do you stand by this message?" Dad said, "It was taken out of context." Context: your son was 17, living alone, and paying off debt you incurred in his name. What's the proper context for calling that support? Silence. Then Sharon pulled out the big one, a sworn affidavit from my old neighbor, Mr. Cray, who had overheard my dad bragging about getting something out of the computer kid before he moves away. Not supporting me. Getting something out of me. The judge read through all of it. Quiet. Focused. No poker face. Just that slow, methodical processing that lets you know someone is doing mental math and your lies aren't adding up. When the ruling came, it was clear and brutal. The court finds no credible evidence of financial support warranting compensation. In contrast, overwhelming documentation shows repeated financial exploitation. Case dismissed. Defendant awarded legal costs. Plaintiffs to pay all court and attorney fees. My parents lost. Officially. Legally. Publicly. They'd have to pay every penny I'd spent defending myself. And probably sell their house to do it. As I packed up my things, Mason tried to catch me in the hallway. "Jude! Come on, man! You got what you wanted!" I looked at him. Not with anger. Just a clean, surgical kind of detachment. "No. I got what I earned. You got what you deserved." He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him talk. I just walked past him, past my mom's stunned silence, past my dad's clenched jaw, out the courthouse and into the cold autumn light. I had my company. I had my name. And now I had peace. Peace didn't mean silence. It just meant I stopped bleeding for people who sharpened knives with my name on them. After the case, the fallout was immediate. My parents went into full damage control, told anyone who'd listen that I was a liar, a thief, a corporate sellout. They left out the part where they tried to sue me into bankruptcy and lost. Mason disappeared off social media for a while, then came back a month later trying to launch a YouTube channel about entrepreneurship. With videos like why family loyalty still matters, and how I helped build a tech company from the ground up. He got 73 views and turned off the comments. I didn't clap back. I didn't respond at all. Because the thing about winning like this, you don't need to yell. You just build. And that's what I did. I took the momentum from the case and threw myself into work. Landed a contract with a logistics hub in Kentucky. 6 warehouses. System overhaul. We did the entire job in 4 weeks. Clean. Efficient. Word spread. By 24, my company, now called Whitman Systems, had 20 clients in 4 states. I hired a real team. Not just part-timers or interns. Real professionals. Paid them well. Trained them. Built a culture where no one had to look over their shoulder to see if someone was waiting to take credit for their work. I also got a dog. His name was Node. He doesn't fetch well, but he's excellent at sleeping under my desk and keeping me from forgetting lunch. Then, just as things were hitting a good rhythm, I got a text. From my mom. 1 line. "Your father collapsed. They're saying heart attack." I sat there staring at it. Not because I didn't care, because for the first time in my life, I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. I went. Of course I did. I'm not a monster. He was in recovery when I arrived. Hooked up to wires. Looked small. Weak. He opened his eyes, saw me, and whispered. "You came." I nodded. "I don't want to fight anymore," he said. I waited. "I'm sorry," he added. "For what we did. For what we tried to take." It didn't feel like a movie. It didn't feel cathartic. It felt like a man realizing the people he bet on weren't the ones who'd show up. I didn't say "I forgive you." I didn't reach for his hand. I just said, "Get better." And I left. Because here's what no one tells you. Sometimes closure doesn't come with hugs or apologies. Sometimes it's just clarity. The moment you realize you're no longer the kid begging for approval. You're the man who built something they couldn't steal. 6 months after my dad's heart attack, they sold the house. A cousin mentioned it in passing at a family gathering I didn't attend. Apparently, they moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment across town. Mason still lived with them. No job, no prospects, still peddling the lie that he was co-founder of a tech company. He even updated his LinkedIn. CEO of Whitman Innovations. No LLC, no address, no shame. My inbox started getting weird. Clients messaging. "Hey, is this your brother? He's contacting us about some joint venture?" He was using my name, again. So I sent a cease and desist. Then I built a small web page. Just 1 page. Clean, simple, polite but firm. Whitman Systems is not affiliated with any other Whitman-run ventures or individuals. Any business claims made under that name should be verified through official company channels. I posted it publicly. And Mason? He shut down his page within a week. I thought that would be the end of it. But these people never stop. Not until you show them what real boundaries look like. And I was about to. It started when I got a call from a major regional hardware chain. They wanted to scale operations across 32 locations and had heard about the Kentucky job. Their systems were chaos, mismatched terminals, outdated databases, printers held together with duct tape and prayer. I pitched a full overhaul. Custom POS, cloud-based inventory, mobile checkouts for contractors. They signed within 2 weeks. It was a $2 million deal. Biggest of my life. I didn't cry. I ordered pizza. I sat in my office with no to sleep under my chair, logged into my business account, saw the wire transfer confirmation, and just breathed. 6 years ago, I was hiding money behind the water heater, eating cold ramen in a storage unit. Now I had a staff of 12. Health insurance. A product roadmap. 2 patents pending. And a full ownership stake in a company no one could take from me. A week after the contract landed, I got another message from Mason. Let's talk. Family to family? I didn't reply. Because this wasn't a grudge. This was a firewall. You don't leave your system open to malware just because it shares your last name. The next morning, I did something quiet. I made a transfer. $75,000. Not to my family. To me. Into a savings account labeled Future. And then I called my realtor. Let's find something with more windows, I said. The place I ended up buying wasn't flashy. It was an old craftsman bungalow on the edge of town, tucked between a farmer's co-op and a trailhead that led nowhere in particular. Built in 1948. Needed work. The porch sagged, and the chimney leaned like it was trying to gossip with the neighbors. But it had bones. Real ones. And more importantly, it felt mine the second I stepped inside. 3 bedrooms. An office. A workshop out back I could wire up however I wanted. Enough space for a dog to roam and a mind to rest. I paid cash. Again. No loans. No cosigner. No signatures but mine. The week after closing, I packed my life into boxes and made the move. My team helped. One guy brought beer, another brought tacos, and we got everything loaded in under 4 hours. That night, I sat on the floor with Node and a plate of greasy tacos and looked around at bare walls and infinite potential. Then my phone buzzed. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. The transcript read, "This is your mother. I don't know why you won't call back. We didn't raise you to be this cold. You owe us a conversation. After everything we gave." Delete. That's the thing people like her never understood. They think motherhood is a ledger. That once you've fed someone, they owe you their future. But I wasn't their IOU anymore. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. Mason again. Handwritten. Like we were pen pals and not veterans of a legal bloodbath. Jude, I know we've had issues. But Mom and Dad aren't doing well. They're behind on rent. The car's busted. I can't find work. We could really use your help. Just a little. Just until we're back on our feet. You've got the means now. Don't forget where you came from. I didn't forget. I remembered everything. I remembered paying rent in a house I was robbed in. I remembered walking into a courtroom and listening to people with my last name accuse me of stealing a life I built from scraps. I remembered what it felt like to sleep next to a bolt cutter because I didn't trust my own family not to break in. I didn't forget. I evolved. I wrote him back one sentence. I'm not your bailout plan. I'm not your business partner. I'm not your backup life. And that was it. I mailed it first class. No return address. No PS. Then I poured a drink, sat on my porch, and listened to nothing. No screaming. No guilt. No manipulation. Just breeze, and silence, and the steady click of Node's nails on the wood planks. This was peace. And I'd earned it. 3 months after settling into the new house, something strange happened. I got an award. Some small business magazine did a write-up on blue-collar tech innovators, and apparently, I made the list. Nothing flashy. No cover photo or champagne or red carpet, just a blurb with my name, a picture of me standing next to a rack of servers, and the caption. Built from scratch, Whitman Systems founder turned teen hardship into multi-state success. I laughed when I saw it. Node sneezed like he agreed. But a week later, I got a letter. A real one. Handwritten, careful script. No return address, but I recognized it. My mother. Inside 4 pages. Rambling. Apologetic. Manipulative. All at once. We're proud of you, even if we didn't always show it. Things were hard. We were scared. Your father misses you. Mason's lost again. Maybe we made mistakes. Maybe we just didn't know how to raise someone like you. But we're still your family. You can't erase us. I folded it slowly. Took a deep breath. And I didn't respond. I took the letter to the shed, the one I'd rebuilt with reclaimed wood and better lighting. I opened a drawer labeled History, a real drawer, not a metaphor, and tucked the letter inside. Not out of spite. Not as a trophy. Just as a record. Because some people collect stamps. And I collect proof that I survived what was meant to break me. 2 days later, Mason posted a video on social media. Him. Standing in front of a rented limbo. Talking about the grind, and how some people will try to keep you down, even your own family. I didn't even get mad. I just felt distant. Like watching an old home movie you're no longer part of. Same voices. Different life. Back inside, my phone buzzed. Text from a longtime client in Michigan. You've always done right by us, Jude. Heard some people talking trash. Just wanted to say, thanks. We trust you. That text meant more than any headline. Because that's what legacy actually looks like. Not noise. Not family feuds. Just trust. Earned. I looked around my home. The woodwork I did myself. The coffee table I built. Node curled on the couch. A life that couldn't be stolen because it wasn't handed down. It was carved out, inch by inch. This wasn't revenge. This was resurrection. Spring rolled in like an apology. Soft rain, new grass, that sharp snap of wind that makes you remember you've got skin again. I planted lavender along the side fence. Built raised garden beds for tomatoes and peppers, because apparently I'm that guy now. The guy with spreadsheets and compost bins. It felt like living. Not escaping. Not recovering. Just being. Until Mason showed up again. Not in person this time. Through a lawyer. Apparently, he'd launched a new business. Whitman Group Consulting. And surprise, he was trying to trademark the name Whitman for tech services. I stared at the letter like it was a prank. He was trying to legally stake a claim to my last name. My company. My story. Sharon called before I even finished reading. He's trying to hijack your identity, Jude. No. I said cold. He's trying to stay tethered to it. We filed a formal objection. My business was registered first. My name was my legal brand. My reputation had receipts that dated back a decade. Mason's? He had a Wix site with 3 stock photos and a paragraph lifted off a motivational Instagram post. The trademark office rejected him so fast they included a side note. Confusingly similar to an established entity. Denied. Another try. Another failure. But it wasn't about winning anymore. Not really. It was about weathering. It was about watching people try to steal your roof while you're busy planting your own trees. After the rejection, I got a voicemail. From Mason. Slurred. Rambling. Probably drunk. You always thought you were better. You're not. You just got lucky. You're not the only one who deserved more, Jude. I had plans too. I deleted it. Because here's the truth. Plans don't mean anything if you never do the work. Dreams are cheap. Execution is expensive. And I've paid in full. That night, I walked out to my workshop. The moon was low, casting long shadows over the gravel. I turned on the light and looked around. Clean. Organized. Tools hung like artifacts. On the wall was a plaque one of my developers gave me. Never let the people who broke you hold the pen. Damn right. Because I write this story now. Every chapter. Every twist. Every ending. And Mason? He's just a footnote I haven't added yet. It happened on a Monday morning, quiet, overcast, one of those days where nothing should go wrong and then absolutely everything does. System crash. One of our newer clients, a heavy equipment rental chain with 19 locations, had ignored our redundancy recommendations. A cheap backup power supply failed, and with it, their entire network. No sales. No access to inventory. Customers waiting. Phones ringing off the hook. Felix, my lead tech and the closest thing I have to a brother, called me at 6:42 a.m. They're in full panic mode. I'm on it, I said, already pulling on jeans. I didn't panic. Not anymore. We rolled up in 2 trucks loaded with gear. Me, Felix, and Maya, our on-site specialist. By noon, we had emergency terminals running. By 2 p.m., the local manager brought us coffee and said, "You saved us." By 4 p.m., the COO was calling to talk long-term contracts. And by 6, I was back in my truck, covered in dust, exhausted, and smiling. Because this was the part no one ever saw in courtrooms or family complaints or Instagram bios. The work. The actual work. The late nights, fried servers, heat-damaged drives, panicked business owners clinging to broken systems, and praying someone shows up who knows how to fix what matters. And I was that someone. On the way home, I got a message from Felix. "Remember when we ran jobs out of a garage with one laptop and a half-broken label printer?" I laughed out loud. Then I pulled over and texted back. "And a roll of duct tape holding the router together. Don't forget that." Never. The memory hit like a wave. The cold floors. The buzzing fluorescence. The sound of Windows XP booting up for the 5th time in a row, while I prayed it wouldn't crash mid-install. Those days weren't glamorous. But they were real. And no one could rewrite them. Back home, Node greeted me with one bark and a full-body tail wag. I showered, ordered Thai food, and sat on my porch as the sky turned from steel to gold. No Mason. No court dates. No panic. Just peace, earned again, one fix at a time. And in that quiet, I thought something I hadn't thought in years. I'm proud of me. Not in spite of them. Not because of revenge. Just because I'm here. Alive. Whole. Free. And no one gets to edit that. A month later, I got an invitation. Not a lawsuit. Not a demand letter. Not a voicemail filled with guilt. An actual invitation. "Jude, please come. No strings, no speeches. Just dinner. Just us. Mom." Attached was a time and an address. Not their apartment. A small restaurant downtown. Neutral ground. For a moment I hovered. Not over the RSVP, over the weight of it. What did "just us" mean now? Did it include Mason? Did it include buried knives and cloth napkins? I showed up. Not because I owed them anything. Because I needed to see for myself how much of me they'd finally stopped trying to own. They were already seated when I walked in. My mother looked thinner, her makeup more effort than effect. My dad was older than I remembered him looking, even in that hospital bed. And Mason? Absent. Good. I sat down. Nobody cried. The table was awkward silence until the waitress brought bread. Then my mom did what she always does, broke it and passed it around like communion. She didn't start with excuses. She started with honesty. "We lost you," she said. "And it was our fault." I didn't say anything. I wanted to see if the sentence could stand on its own without a but. My dad cleared his throat. "You built something we never understood. But now we know that just because we don't understand it doesn't mean we're entitled to it." He said entitled. That was new. That was honest. They didn't ask for money. They didn't bring up the house. They didn't mention Mason. They just asked how I was. How the business was. How the dog was doing. It was the first time I'd spoken to them in years without mentally preparing a defense. And when the check came, I paid it without resentment. Because I could. Because paying for dinner isn't the same as paying for forgiveness. After we stepped outside, my mom touched my arm. "We know we don't deserve anything from you," she said. "We just want you to know we're proud. Truly." And for the first time, I believed her. Not because she said it. Because I didn't need her to. I walked back to my truck and drove home in quiet. Not the cold kind. The earned kind. The kind where you don't wonder if peace is real, you just feel it. I didn't tell anyone about the dinner. Not Felix. Not my team. Not even Corinna, the woman I'd been quietly seeing for the past 6 months, the structural engineer with steel-toe boots, wicked sarcasm, and a laugh that made my ribs relax. Not because I was hiding it. Because it didn't need to be part of the story I told anymore. It was a chapter. Not a headline. The week after, I went back to work like usual, client site in Pennsylvania, onboarding with a new rental company, a training session for warehouse staff who still thought cloud was a weather forecast. And in the background of all that, something strange happened. I felt safe. Not physically. Not financially. I'd been those things for a while. Emotionally. Like the ghost of being a disappointment had finally stopped rattling chains behind every win. Corinna noticed the shift before I did. We were standing in my kitchen, cooking something complicated only because she was determined to break me out of my rice and eggs rut. She looked over and said, "You've been quiet. Good quiet or serial killer quiet?" She smiled. "Good. Like you've stopped waiting for something to fall apart." I thought about that. She was right. For years I'd lived like a guy who expected the floor to disappear. Every nice thing came with a side of suspicion. Every success felt like the prelude to a crash. That's what trauma does, it teaches you to flinch before you're even hit. But not anymore. I'd built a business from a basement. Survived a family that tried to turn me into a bank. Beat a lawsuit designed to strip me of my name. And now? I was planting herbs with someone who made my house smell like home and who never once asked me to shrink to be loved. Later that night, sitting on the couch, she leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "You know, you don't have to keep proving yourself. Not to me. Not to anyone." I looked at her. And I said something I hadn't said out loud until then. "I'm not proving anything anymore. I'm just living." And damn, that felt good. By summer, we'd crossed 400 active clients. 3 states turned into 8. The shop I used to rent? Bought it. Knocked out the back wall, expanded into the adjacent lot. Built a training center for small business owners. I called it the workbench. People showed up, from hardware store clerks to automotive guys with grease-stained jeans and zero-tech confidence. We taught them how to run their systems without feeling like they needed a degree to press a button. Plain talk. Real tools, I told my staff. Because not everything needed to sound like a TED Talk. A local news station did a segment. Called it The Basement Billionaire. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. I wasn't even a millionaire yet, but I guess to them, the headline sells more than the spreadsheet. I didn't care. The phones rang off the hook the next day. Still, it wasn't about ego. Not anymore. It was about impact. Maya, my first full-time hire, now ran our outreach department. Felix had transitioned into operations manager and had business cards now, which he said made him feel like he was one budget meeting away from total villainy. Karina helped me redesign the shop's electrical layout on her weekends, because she enjoyed it. Because it made her feel like she was helping build something that would last. One Friday afternoon, we had a staff barbecue in the back lot. Nothing fancy. Burgers, cheap beer, music off a Bluetooth speaker stuck between 2 folding chairs. I looked around and felt something I hadn't felt since I was a kid fiddling with a broken microwave on my parents' kitchen table. Belonging. Not the kind that gets handed to you with a pat on the head and a "be more like your brother." The kind you build. One soldered wire at a time. One choice. One boundary. One refusal to let the past win. That night, Karina and I walked back to the house in silence. She kicked off her boots at the door, leaned against the counter, and said, "This place feels like you." What, slightly uneven and held together by recycled parts? "No," she said. "Solid. Warm. Built on purpose." And that's when I knew. Everything they tried to take from me? I didn't just get it back. I multiplied it. One morning, I walked out to the shop early, before emails, before calls, before the day could demand anything from me. The sun was just rising, casting that dusty gold light across the concrete. I opened the garage door, stood there with a cup of black coffee, and just existed. No noise. No flashbacks. No mental checklists of who I needed to prove wrong. Just me. Standing in a place I built, with hands that once shook holding a soldering iron under flickering basement lights. Karina joined me, barefoot, hoodie over pajamas. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. We stood together in the kind of silence that means peace, not absence. And I realized something. My life no longer feels borrowed. It feels earned. Last night, I stood on my porch with Karina, a quiet sky above us and Node snoring somewhere inside. I looked out over the yard, past the raised beds and the workshop lights still glowing faintly through the trees. And I thought, this is it. Not revenge. Not redemption. Just a life that no one gave me, and no one can take. My family once tried to turn me into a bank, a scapegoat, a backup plan for a future they fumbled. But I didn't just escape them. I outgrew them. I don't carry their voices in my head anymore. I carry my own. The one that says, "You did this. You held the line. You built the life. You stayed standing." And when people ask what it took, I'll say this: every single time they came for me, I built another wall. Until one day, it stopped being a fortress, and became a home.